of 1864, Tommy wrote me with a perilous request. His unit had a number of blankets and winter coats, but they had no place to store them safely with the enemy so close at hand.
So about 2 years ago, we found out about a grant that we could apply for this traveling exhibit, Civil War 150. We were one of 50 libraries who also received a grant as well as hosting the exhibit. Our opening night featured one of the professors from the History Department and Southern Studies Department, Dr. Sarah Gardner, and she spoke about reading during the Civil War. And we also have had a speaker from our Special Collections and Archives. We have a display with those artifacts in the display case. So to have someone to be able to talk about what Mercer was doing during that time period was really important. Mercer did exist, it stayed open.
Leading up to the war, Mercer's patronage had accelerated like a dream. Going into the decade, Mercer had 7 faculty members and the collegiate department's largest ever graduating class. When students picked up books for the academic routine on the 1st of September 1860, they took board in the homes of faculty members and other community pillars in the same way they had for years. 11 boarded with President Nathaniel Macon Crawford, 26 with Professor Uriah Wise, 3 with Professor Shaler Granby Hillier, and 15 in the home of Cynthia Sanders, who was the widow of Mercer's first president, Billington.
And then we had a Mercer alum do an interpretive reading at a local historic Civil War historic site, the Cannonball House.
One of the soldiers went for Tommy, who came to me directly. Poor Tommy. His first reaction when he saw me was to believe some calamity had occurred, that maybe my mother in Missouri had passed away. I promised him both were fine. But I did have to sadly inform him of Toby's death, and he cried for Toby just as I had, for he loved Toby as much as we did. But when his grief subsided, he said, "Sister, I know you have a secret to tell. Now what is it?" I responded, "It is this. I have saved all those precious things you sent me from Dalton. I have brought them to deliver them to their rightful owners. Please help me to do so as quickly as possible, that I may return to Jonesboro tonight." Had a bombshell exploded at his feet, the effect could not have been more electrical. He ran for the other officers, and all insisted that I stay the night. I agreed. Now, I was among friends at this point.
The presentation was on Mary Ann Harris Gay of Decatur, Georgia. She wrote the novel Life in Dixie During the War, 1861 through 65. It was published for her nephew, Thomas Stokes' son. It's simply fascinating to me to read novels like this, to portray them to others, to help people understand. I think history becomes a little more fascinating when someone is acting it out. That way you're not just reading it in a book. It becomes a little more interesting that way and gives you a feel for what really happened.
And then finally we ended with the 8th Regiment Band from Rome, Georgia.
This band was the brass and percussion section of the Rome, Georgia Symphony Orchestra, and I was a conductor at the time. One of my trombone players in the symphony came to me one night and said, "Did you know that there's a book that has been published recently that has some Civil War band arrangements in it that have been redone in such a way that you can perform these things on modern brass instruments?" And I said, "No." He said, "Would you like to have them?" Well, sure. There were 12 original Civil War tunes like Dixie, Bonnie Blue Flag, Star Spangled Banner, Yankee Doodle, these kind of things, but rearranged so that you didn't have to have the original instruments that we have in different pitches, and they could be played on modern instruments. So after the rehearsal, I got the brass boys to stay, and we played through them, and everybody got excited. So our desire for an authentic sounding brass band was born right then.
That they'll take away a fresh perspective on the Civil War. It was a very contentious time in our history for all sorts of reasons, and but they were like us in a lot of ways. I mean, we're living our day-to-day lives. How did the war affect their day-to-day lives, for good or for ill, and bringing that history back to life and keeping it alive so that we can remember that part of our history.